gluten-free and saves food dollars by providing what you need in one simple seed. Salva, a food for a new, modern generation.
Hey everybody, it's Deuce from Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market. Have you ever noticed that the word change is found in the word challenge? We have, and that's why we have the highest trained and most understanding staff around. They will assist you in picking out the freshest produce, finding the perfect supplement, or figuring out which cereal has the most fiber. Whatever you need to turn your challenges into change. Clark's, changing the way you shop for health day by day.
Welcome to Smart Health Talk with your host, Elaine McFadden.
Yeah, that's right. We're listening to Smart Health Talk Radio Show, and you're right here on Kcaa 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind. And you know what? That rings true for Smart Health Talk too, because we put you first. We care about what's going on with you. We care about your life, your health. And we hope that you tune in every Thursday to get a little bit more information, because I guarantee you tune every week to Smart Health Talk, you are going to be a smart shopper. And not only are you going to be saving money, but you're going to be feeling good. You're going to be looking good. Have that energy that you lost and wonder where it went. All those kind of things, the answers are right here. That's right here on Smart Health Talk. And I'm your host, Elaine McFadden. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a master's in public health. And I kind of been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I know what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to steer you wrong. I'm just going to bring you the very best information that you can get and trust. And this is not what you get from normal media. Okay, you get it here on Kcaa, but not normal media. But we cut right to the chase, and we have some excellent lineup for you today. Seeds. I mean, seeds and soil are really the basis of all of our life here. That's what gives us life. And we just kind of take these kind of things for granted. We don't realize that we are putting our seed supply at extreme risk by many of the agricultural farm practices that are going on now. And do you want to eat boring food? I mean, do you want to eat the same friggin' thing day after day after day? Do you want to keep eating those hard, tasteless tomatoes? I mean, let's face it, the flavor is gone. Okay, the flavor is gone out of food, everyone, and there's a really big reason for it. The way we grow food, the different varieties that we're choosing to grow. I mean, there are so many things involved here. The future. We're talking about the future of our planet, the future of our food supply. We're not just talking national security here. We're talking global security. And I'm telling you, this is a very serious subject. But it's also a fun subject. And I'm hoping that you'll stay for the entire show, because this impacts all of us, everyone. The diversity of food that we have to eat, the diversity of our seeds that we have, the foods that we're growing, what we're eating, all of these things come down to the seeds and the soil. And we have people that are going to be on our show today that, if you have ever heard of the mysterious seed vault, way up there in icy Norway, up in some mountain somewhere, a giant vault full of seeds from all over the world. We have people that are going to give us all of the information on that, because they have been working on a documentary, and we've got some big premieres coming out for this documentary, because it's just now being released, and it's very exciting. And I love this subject. I love this subject of seeds, because within every one of those seeds is life. It's life, and it's all of the wonderful things about life, all of the diversity of foods and variety that we have to eat on this planet. I mean, how more fascinating could we get than food, everybody? And the wonder of it, the wonder of what has been created on this planet, on all of the different in all of the different countries and all of the different climates. I mean, I just think this is just one of the most wonderful and interesting subjects that we could ever go into. And I can't wait to learn about the vault. And I can't wait to learn about the wonderful new documentary that these people have been working on called The Seeds of Time. And so they're going to be telling us all about this. We have Sandy McLeod and Carrie Fowler. They have both been working on this documentary, and I want everyone to know about it, and I want everyone to watch this documentary because we need to get connected. We need to get connected to where our food comes from, where our life comes from, the security of the food, the food availability on this planet. And we don't realize, that all of these things, like if our soils stop producing yields at the highest that they could produce and instead start going the other direction, if we have a disease happen that's susceptible to the one kind of food that we're growing, what is going to happen to us? These are all scenarios that we need to look at the what ifs because we have put ourselves in the position for this to happen to us. And so we're going to talk about like the what ifs. We're going to talk about the great things that are happening. And I think that we lost our guest. So we're hoping that our guest is, there they are, calling back in. I was just about ready to introduce them. Okay, we got Joe on it right here, and he's getting our guests on the line. Okay, we got him, Joe? Okay, are both guests on the same line? Hello, have we got Sandy and Gary there? Carrie Fowler?
Yes.
Okay, we got both of you on the same line. That's what I was wondering. Okay, welcome to Smart Health Talk, Sandy and Carrie. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for all the work on this incredible documentary. I know it was a work of love, and that you guys put your whole heart into this. Am I right or am I right?
You're right.
I knew it. So what, tell me, how did you guys get started on this?
I had read an article about Carrie in the New Yorker, and when I read the article, I realized that he was working on a lot of things that I was completely unfamiliar with. I didn't understand that we'd lost this tremendous amount of diversity. I didn't really know much about seed banks or that there were so many of them.
Well, Sandy, why would you even care about this stuff? Why were you even caring about Carrie and what he was doing? What was going on in your life where this was something?
I guess I've always been a foodie. I like to eat, and I realized that really what he's talking about is the foundation of our food, and without that foundation, we're just not going to be in very good shape.
So you looked at the big picture. You were looking at the big picture, like I was talking about at the beginning of the show on the global security, food security. Is that the kind of the perception that you have?
Well, and our national food security. I mean, yes, it's a global issue, but it's also a local issue. It could potentially affect all of us, especially at a time when agriculture is quite fragile, not sustainable, and
you got to be kidding me! This is the USA, Sandy. We don't have to worry about food here.
Well,
that's what people think, isn't it? We've got grocery stores full of food. There seems like an endless supply.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that people here have never experienced famine and don't really think about that as even possible probably here.
Famine is, that's like something, oh wow, that happened like back in the Stone Ages or something, they don't even think that could happen to to us now. And yet, one of the messages in your documentary is famine could be a very real thing facing us in the future. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that it's getting to be more and more difficult to grow food, and that the way we do it is not sustainable, and that we really need to think about other ways to do this better. And we're not really doing that.
And plus, we have a growing population.
We have a growing population. We have limited water, as you guys know very well out here. We have limited arable land. We have peak oil, so fertilizer's gotten to be very expensive. We have diminished diversity by quite a lot. And we have climate change, which no one ever talks about in relation to agriculture.
Okay, all those things you just mentioned, I definitely want to go into each of those during our conversation today. And I agree with you on all of those issues. There's something that we need to look at, especially like right here in our own country. We think that we don't realize that the capacity of our fields to produce food is diminishing with the practices that you just laid out for us, and what that actually means to each individual consumer out there. Because one of the things I like about this topic is there is no way around it that this does not impact every single person, because we're all buying food. That's a big part of our food budget. And when those prices start going up, we really feel it. There are some people that feel it, that live on fixed incomes, that can just devastate them with a rise in a cost in food. And so that's, I'm thinking about all of these things too as I'm listening to you. Now, Carrie, you were obviously, we had Sandy over there reading about you, some big article about you. So you must have been already kind of on the radar of a lot of people out there. What were you up to when Sandy was reading about you?
Well, I've been working on this issue for quite a few decades, and I got interested in the question of agricultural biodiversity back in the 1970s. I was sort of emotionally prepared for that because I spent some summers on my grandmother's farm, and personality-wise, I just simply like diversity, so I'm always willing to experiment and try something new. But what I learned back in the 1970s, and to start with, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences published a book-length study, and it was called Genetic Vulnerability of Major Crops. And it concluded that American agriculture was highly uniform genetically and highly vulnerable. And if you look worldwide, it's clear that we've lost a lot of genetic diversity, and that our food system has become more precarious, with more uncertainty, more risk, more tenuous, particularly in the context of climate change. And if you look at all the challenges that agriculture faces that Sandy just enumerated, the problems with climate, water, land availability, nutrients, and the seeming need to produce more food for a growing population, then you have to conclude that the one thing we really don't need to do is to limit our options in terms of the evolution and adaptation of our food crops. And yet that's exactly what we do when we lose the diversity of those crops. So I was interested, I guess, first as an activist, political activist in a way. But later, I had that career sort of morphed into being a university professor, working at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and then finally heading a global organization called the Global Crop Diversity Trust.
Oh, just a few little jobs on the side, that's all.
Yeah. And then, of course, this Svalbard Global Seed Vault. So all of these things have sort of pointed in the direction of trying to figure out how we can get people organized and on board, and institutions and governments on board to conserve crop diversity.
Well, take us in the room of a group that is involved in the Global Seed Vault project. I mean, what's it like, when you guys get together? What kind of things do you talk about?
Well, I have to go a step back from that, because the thing that will surprise everyone is that there are really not many people involved.
Oh yeah, I heard Prince Charles was involved. Is that true?
No, no.
He's
The
not.
internet,
Okay.
well, the internet is a wonderful thing.
I have read that several times. Okay, now I get the
Yeah.
inside story. No, he is not.
No, no. There are probably 1,000 people involved on the internet, but only 2 or 3 in reality. No, actually, the seed vault is not staffed on a full-time or permanent basis, at least not on location. And while over the years, quite a few people have been involved, and you could even say if there was a cast of thousands and hundreds of thousands if you want to include the farmers that actually produced this diversity that's ended up in the seed vault. But in terms of the management of the actual facility, it's a couple of people. Of course, they have fairly big institutions in the government of Norway behind them, but we don't really get together in a room.
Well, I guess temperature control was not like a problem. You have a pretty constant temperature going on there. What were some of the other expenses for building this vault? I mean, is it an actual structure, or is it just like you just cut out some ice and there's a big door in front of it?
Yeah, let me describe it to you. It's a structure that's built inside of a mountain in Svalbard, which is an archipelago north of mainland Norway. It's at about 78 degrees north, so it's about as far north as you can fly on a plane, and as far north as you can live and do things like this in the world. So we built a facility inside of a mountain there. It's really kind of a tunnel with a series of rooms at the very end. And it's in permafrost, which means that the temperature is a pretty steady -5 degrees Celsius. And one of the things that we wanted to achieve, we wanted to provide the conditions for conserving seed long term. And to do that, you really just have to meet 2 criteria. They have to be frozen, ideally down to a temperature of about -18 Celsius, which is about -3 or 4 Fahrenheit. And they have to be dried to a certain moisture content. And if you do that, you slow down the biological activity in the seed, and they last for a long time. So since we wanted to we conceived of this facility as a safety backup for existing seed banks around the world. Most countries have their national seed banks, and some universities do, and some non-government organizations do. But all of those institutions, all of those buildings are sort of in the real world, if you will, and they're subject to all kinds of accidents and problems and funding shortages and everything like that.
Bombs.
Yeah, could be. Well, hope not.
Yeah,
and,
hopefully not.
And so we wanted a safety net for that. And so we wanted a place that was far away from those normal kind of dangers, but we wanted also a place that was naturally cold. And so even though we do mechanically lower the temperature from about -5 to -18, at least we get the -5 for free. And the challenge of lowering it that extra 13 degrees is not as great as it would be in the tropics somewhere. And we also know that, even if our mechanical freezing equipment failed, even at -5, we would be just fine for 25 or 30 years, which gives us a long time to get the mechanics sorted out. So that was the general idea, and we built. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. So you guys really put, some major thinking into the building of this facility, and the withstanding, different kinds of things that could happen. I had just heard that like some glacier that was like 10 million years old or something like that is about ready to crack in Antarctica. Did you hear that?
Yes. Well, and sometimes people say, well, what about climate change in relation to this facility. And of course, one of the reasons we wanted to build the facility was to conserve this diversity, to give us options precisely for climate change. And
how do you figure that? That
connection.
Yeah, the connection of a diversity of seeds and climate change. Because, from what I would guess that you were saying is that when you have certain seeds, like for instance, I just became knowledgeable on something called the temporary bean not too long ago, and I was fascinated with this bean because it actually does better without water. It only needs a rain or a flood or something, and it starts going, and it grows with the least amount of water of any other like bean in the world, something like that. And I thought, wow, we need to be growing more temporary beans. And so from what I'm gathering that you're saying is that inside the DNA of many of these seeds is the ability to withstand a wide variety of different temperatures, whether it be cold or hot. And we need that. We need seeds that can adapt to all these different temperatures. They're like ready to go without having to go. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Sally. Excuse me, Sandy. What was it you had to say?
Well, they hold the genetics that, for example, a couple of traits that we're going to need for climate change are drought tolerance and heat resistance. Where do you find that? So if you have all these genetics saved and evolved, you can start to look for those genetics in those seeds.
Yeah, I think if you look at what's happening with climate change, we're getting higher average temperatures, we're getting higher extremes and longer periods of extremely hot weather, and hot weather during flowering time for plants when they're very vulnerable to heat. It can affect, even sterilize the pollen in plants, which obviously will reduce production. And it affects plants. It affects every part of the plant and at every stage in the life cycle. The leaves will curl up and reduce photosynthesis if it gets very hot. Respiration will increase, and you'll get a decrease in the moisture in the plant. The roots will be affected. It'll affect the quantity, the quality, and the timing of all growth processes.
Which would include the formation of nutrition.
Yeah, and it'll actually reduce protein content in some of the grains. So, but there's no magic bullet. There's no climate change gene that we can have, but we do have a tremendous amount of diversity within each crop. Up in Svalbard at the Seed Vault, we have over 100,000 different varieties of rice and 100,000 different varieties of wheat. And it doesn't mean that one of those particular varieties is something you want to take out and grow as a commercial crop. But it might mean that one of those varieties has an important trait in it, a trait that will help the pollen deal with very high temperatures, for example, or will be resistant to a new pest or disease that shows up on the doorstep. So this is why you need to conserve this type of diversity, because our agricultural crops are domesticated crops, and their evolution, in other words, their adaptation in the real world, is really in our hands, and we need that diversity. And if we don't have it, we don't have, let's say, natural disease or pest resistance, and of course we inherit nature's work.
I'm thinking of a couple of companies that are kind of into DNA, pretty heavy, and taking it from plants and calling it their own. And are these biotech companies? Are they involved in this project in some way? I would think they would be really interested in all the DNA that you guys have in there.
Well, you would, but not really. Again, that's one of those things that you can go on the internet and find all kinds of
Yeah, I know people have said this stuff.
quote,
That's why I'm asking you.
information about that. But and I've seen some pretty wild things on the internet. But no, we haven't had any companies involved in the seed vault. It was built by the government of Norway, which really doesn't need corporate money and
Yeah.
doesn't want it. And it cost about $9 million to build a seed vault, and Norway paid every last one of those dollars. And it doesn't cost very much to operate. We have 864,000 seed samples there, and it costs about, I don't know, $250,000 a year to operate the facility. So that's taken care of by the endowment of my the organization I formerly headed. And just to be a little bit clear, the seed vault operates like a safety deposit box at the bank, and so institutions, say the National Seed Bank of the United States, which is located out in Fort Collins, Colorado, it would deposit a copy of its collections. So it would basically multiply its seed and take some of those seeds of each of the varieties it has and put them in a package and send them to the seed vault. And once in the seed vault, nobody else except the depositor has access to them. So some of the corporations you mentioned, well, first of all, they weren't involved in the financing of it, and second, they haven't deposited any seeds, so they really
So sorry, you're not. There's no reason for them to be involved if they haven't made a deposit, because it's only the depositors that can then withdraw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that doesn't stop people from saying they're involved and spreading all kinds of stuff on the internet. But and you know, like the philosophers tell you, you can't prove a negative. So I can only say it hasn't happened.
So Sandy, I'd like to ask you, like, what out of all your involvement in all this, like, what has really impacted you the most that you've learned along the way, or you know, that a project that you worked on, people that you interacted with, what really seemed to impact you the most that you didn't really know before?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do the film was I wanted people to be able to see someone who had an idea and you know, an idea that affects, as you said, every single one of us because of, you know, of our involvement with food globally, and carried it out, you know, and you know, you can see sort of that struggle in the film. And I'm a big believer in people getting an idea and following it through, and that individuals can make huge changes.
Right on, Sandy. I love it. I love it.
You know, and that we do have, as consumers, even, we do, you know, vote every time we buy food. So it's important to be thoughtful about those things. Something you do 3 times a day, every day, and so you know, people feel like they're out. They don't have much say. They don't have a lot of control. But I think they do. I think we just don't. Somehow we don't connect the dots.
I so agree with you on that, Sandy. And like, after I've done so much thinking on all this, and I've talked to like so many incredible people on this show, and then I have a web page that I call Opponents to Prop 37, and it's under our one of our main tabs that we have there, our podcast section. But on that page, we have like all these companies that pay to defeat GMO labeling, that put all these pesticides and poisons in their food. And, you know, they really don't care. They care more about profits, and they care about people's health, obviously. And I just say, why would we give any of these people any of our money when obviously we know what they do with it? You know, they use it against us. They use it to sell us cheap food. when other organic companies, they're willing to make way less money and sleep at night knowing that they're providing safe food for families. And I mean, I would much rather give my money to those kind of people than to big corporations that just use it to create more junk food, really, and pay for advertising to convince us to buy it, even though we know it's not good. So, I totally agree with you, Sandy, and I wish we could just get people to understand that simple principle that, because we always want to blame others, don't we? It's just so easy to blame all of this. Oh, it's the politicians' fault. They support these companies, and we're not doing enough here or there. And I think, no, it's not them, it's us. We're the ones supporting those companies with our dollars.
Yeah, we also support the politicians, unfortunately, and don't really pay attention when it comes to farm subsidies and farm bills. Not too many people really think about those things.
Yeah, the farm subsidy thing is a big issue, because I have a pie chart on my homepage that shows almost all the money goes to either dairy, meat, or like GMO corn. Less than 1% of the billions of farm bill dollars go to fruits and vegetables, which the USDA says are supposed to, half our plate are supposed to be fruits and vegetables to prevent chronic disease. So if that's so, why are we giving less than 1% of the billions of farm bill dollars to fruit and vegetable farmers? And all the rest goes to all of these other crops. Well, it's there's a reason for it. It's because mainly it supports fast food. And those are all the things that support fast food in my mind. So I wanted to get to the diversity issue. Now, this documentary, you guys have been having like some showings in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
We open tomorrow night in L.A.
Oh, tomorrow night's your big premiere night.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Oh my gosh, tomorrow's the big premiere. Okay, where is the premiere at?
At Lemley's Music Hall.
And people can buy tickets?
Oh yeah, they can buy tickets.
And they go to your website, the Seeds of Time?
They can get them through our website, which is seedsoftimemovie.com, or they can call the theater and order them.
And Sandy and I will be there at the showing that's around 7 p.m. Tomorrow night and the next night.
Okay.
Or sort of a question and answer
discussion.
We'll be
doing a Q&A. So.
And then are you guys going to be traveling around the country showing the documentary?
Yeah, we have been, and we will continue to do it. I'm headed to Nebraska after this to show the film.
What has been the reaction that you've gotten after people have watched the movie?
People are very enthusiastic about it, and I think a little bit dumbstruck, because there are a lot of things in there that I wasn't the only one who never thought about those things. There are actually other people. Although it took me 8 years to make the film, and I thought, my God, by the time I get this finished, everyone will know everything in this film. But unfortunately, people don't, So it's been interesting to see the reaction of people.
Don't you love it though? I just love it that's why I love doing this radio show so much. It's just when you get a chance to enlighten people with something that it is so important in their life, really. And maybe they don't realize it's important in the beginning, but as they kind of go through it, just like what you said, you started to see the value in these things, and you started to see the connection for, in so many different ways, and not just today, but in our future. And the choices that we make now are going to have such a big impact. And I feel like we're at such an important place right now, don't you? Do you guys feel that way too?
Yeah, I really do. I really feel like it's we really have to pay attention and focus on the important things in life. And I think food ranks way up there.
It totally does. That's what I dedicated my life to, is food. Because, hey, food is like some good stuff. I tell you, when you've had just like the ultimate food, I mean, you just remember it, don't you? And then you just like, you crave it. And one of the things that I love to use as an example, and maybe you guys can relate to this and you might have something to add, but let's take garlic, okay? And garlic, like, I think this is the perfect example for what you guys are talking about, where our diversity has been compromised. And then I would like to talk about a couple of worst case scenarios, and we could try to talk about a best case scenario too, on what could happen and where the seed bank would really come into play as an important savior in that situation. So if you could think about that a little bit, Carrie, I'd like to hear a little worst case scenario from you, which we don't like to think about, everyone, but we do have to, because this is how we protect ourselves. And we wish for the best, but we have to plan for the worst, right? Anyway, what was I saying before that? The garlic. Yeah, we were talking about the garlic. Thank you, Joe. Well, the garlic that you buy in the store, almost all the garlic in the regular grocery store is from China. And it's this one particular variety of garlic. When, I don't know, do you know about how many varieties of garlic there could possibly be in the world, you guys? Does either one of you know that?
I don't really know. I know that in the garden at home, my wife and I should say my wife grows quite a few varieties. But
and how many do you think you have in your vault?
I don't know the answer to that either. That's a good question. That's a new question for me.
Okay, all right. I love it when I stimulate some thought. Okay, yeah, well, okay, so the garlic. What was it, Sandy?
Well, what we do know is that, the last census that looked at the U.S. vegetable scene in the U.S. was done in 1983. Is that right, Carrie? And that somewhere between 93 and 97% of all the fruits and vegetables that we once had have gone extinct.
What?
So that's a lot.
Well, those are the vegetable varieties that were grown in the United States, at the turn of the century, around 1900. And we lost a lot of those varieties. The U.S. Department of Agriculture back in the old days, late 1800s, early 1900s, was doing was sort of taking a census of the different varieties that we were growing of all the different crops. And if you look at that information, they were very attuned to the differences in variety. You'll see that most of those varieties are gone. So we've lost more than 6,000 different varieties of apples along the way, named varieties of apples in the United States. And worldwide, if you go back to where crops originated and where they have the most diversity, there's never been a head count on that diversity, so I can't give you numbers, but we know that quite a lot of that diversity has just disappeared. So what we're left with is all we have, and it's all we're going to have in the future, and it contains all the options that agriculture will have in the future, and that's the big reason it's so important.
That's incredibly sad. That's devastating. That's just horrible. And well, the thing is, when we're like I said, when we're buying into this system and we keep supporting it, why would we expect anything different? And we keep buying this one kind of garlic at the grocery store that's from China, that's been bred to take the oil out of it, which is the very thing that has the flavor and the antioxidants to prevent disease, because the more oil, the shorter the shelf life. And they want to increase the shelf life So they bred it to take the oil out to increase shelf life. And so people are getting gypped. And this is one of the things I wanted to ask you what you thought, Sandy, because are you, was part of this? Are you a mom as well?
I'm not.
Oh, you're not. Okay, that's why I wanted to ask, because I had this feeling. Maybe you weren't. I just had this feeling. But, obviously this is almost kind of like your baby in a way. This documentary,
Yep.
It's like your baby. It's like your gift to the world. And, the fact that, the nutrients, like how do you feel about the loss in nutrition in our food?
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, it's, we have been breeding food for yield, not nutrition. We need to, we could probably grow less corn that was more nutritious and fare better than, some of these varieties that we grow now, which is really about.
That's an interesting concept. I like the thought of that concept because we have an obesity problem in this country, and I am so on that bandwagon as far as like eating less calories with more nutrition. That's what we need to be figuring out how to do, and increasing the nutritional value in foods instead of taking it away, which in my opinion, that's what genetic modification is doing. Now,
and the other thing, Elaine, is that, I don't know if you know this story, but the world is 90% uniform in one variety of wheat. And there's a wheat rust, which started in Uganda, called UG99, and it jumped the Red Sea, and it's gone up the Middle East to Pakistan, and it completely wipes out a farmer's field, and we have no known resistance to it. And because the world is 90% uniform in wheat, this is a really dangerous situation. And we eat a lot of wheat in this.
Well, that's that diversity, and that's one of the things I was just going to go to Carrie about, the worst case scenario. And it's almost like Sandy was just kind of laying the groundwork for one of those worst case scenarios, Carrie.
Well, I think that probably is the worst case scenario. Because we have so much wheat or rice or corn in the world and so many acres devoted to it, we don't generally think of it as an endangered species. But when you think more profoundly about biology and evolution and apply that to our domesticated crops, you have to realize that extinction is a process. It's not an event, and it doesn't take place when the last individual dies. It takes place when the species loses the ability to evolve, and it evolves successfully to new conditions because there are always new conditions. So the real key to the continued success of our agricultural system, our agricultural crops, lies in the ability of the crops to evolve and to change and to adapt to new climates and new pests and diseases. So every once in a while what happens is, it happened back in the 1840s, which is why I'm an American and not an Irishman.
Okay.
We have something that comes up like the potato famine in Ireland, where the potato crop is fairly uniform genetically, and was at least uniform genetically to the extent that it was uniformly susceptible to a certain disease, which caused the potato blight there. And that's a biological phenomena, and we haven't repealed those laws. So we're still vulnerable to those kind of situations. And if we have large amounts of land planted to very similar
Everything's just the same. It's just like carbon copy.
One as I think is said in the movie Seeds of Time, that if one plant is vulnerable, all of them are vulnerable, and that's happening currently with wheat. But at any given time, you can search the internet. There are sites like something called ProMed, and you can look and find examples of crop epidemics that are happening all the time. And what we need, therefore, is the diversity, because you make an assumption here, and the assumption is that at some point in the history of that crop, it saw that disease, and it somehow overcame it through resistance, through developing resistance. If it hadn't, we wouldn't even know it as a crop. It would have already become extinct. So what happens in a case of this wheat disease, UG99, is that we search the gene banks, and we find varieties, and we find material that will offer some resistance, and we try to get that back in the crop. And that's the race, that's the treadmill that we're on, and we're on it with every single crop, and that's why we need to conserve this diversity, is to give us those options.
And as the climate changes, plants get really stressed, And also, as we say in the movie, you can't just move crops north. You have to help them adapt to the environment that they're in.
I have a question. Well, I wanted to ask. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sandy.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I just thought people might be confused because there's actually people that are trying to confuse people. They try to say, "Oh, we've been creating GMOs for hundreds of years." They try to say like just weird stuff like that. And I was just wanted you to clarify a little bit, like when you're talking about, okay, we can search our seed banks and look for maybe a variety of seed that may have a resistance to that particular disease, and we would want to introduce maybe the traits from that seed back into this other wheat crop that we had. Now, how would we actually do that? Could you do that by using the old-fashioned crossbreeding? So maybe you would want to try to plant like both of the crops together, and they would just naturally crossbreed, and that we don't necessarily have to achieve that in the lab.
Well, from to be accurate, you could do it either way, but the reality is that most plant breeding is done the traditional way for almost all the crops, and that kind of traditional breeding has been going on for, hundreds of years. You could almost say thousands of years.
And not GMOs. GMOs are a very recent thing.
Well, they're very recent. I mean, bees have even been doing it for thousands of years and taking pollen from one plant to another one, and that's how we have different apple varieties, by the way. That's where Golden Delicious and all the other...
So those bees are responsible for that. They were the little breeders.
They've been doing a lot of plant breeding. And in fact, that's how almost all of our old apple varieties were produced, was by bees pollinating a tree and farmers saving the seeds from those apples and from the mother, so to speak, and planting them and seeing how they turned out. But that kind of traditional plant breeding and really relies on the diversity that we have.
And we've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to give you each a chance to give us some last-minute thoughts and remind everyone of your website and the theater where the documentary is playing tomorrow night and the next night.
Well, maybe I'll go first because Sandy has all the other information in her head and I don't. But I think the take-home message is that we shouldn't assume that everything is going to be okay in terms of agriculture and climate change. Our crops are on the front line. They're going to feel some of the harshest effects soonest. And we need to be prepared for that as a society. We don't need to be, for example, reducing the budget of our national seed bank, which recently happened. So we have to press our politicians and we have to support programs that will conserve the diversity and will expand traditional plant breeding.
Agriculture is everybody's business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, go, Sandy.
Our website is seedsoftimemovie.com, and the movie is playing starting tomorrow at Lemley Music Hall in Beverly Hills.
Woo, woo, woo. I want to get dressed up for the premiere and show up. That sounds like fun. I'm sure you guys, I'm sure it's like good people too that show up at your documentary. I mean, those are the kind of people I like to hang out because they just care. You know, they're there because they care and they're interested and they want to learn new things, and those are the great people to hang out with because they're the most interesting. So, okay, well, I want to thank you both for joining us, and I want to thank you also for all your work and all those years that you didn't give up, Sandy, and get this movie made, and all your years of dedication to become who you are today. Carrie, it sounds like you've just done some incredible things in your life, and I'm so proud to have you as a guest today. So thank you both. And everyone, organic seeds. You can buy all kinds of organic seeds. There's so many different companies. Please do a search for that. I know there's some really great lists out there. And join us next Thursday for Smart Health Talk, and check out our social media, everybody. And thanks so much. Take care and be a smart shopper. Bye. Will the birds and the bees survive?
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
I'm Tom Busby, CNBC Radio. Stocks end the day a little bit lower following a huge sell-off in China's stock market today and worries about whether Greece will reach a deal with creditors ahead of a big debt payment deadline coming next week. The Dow today down 36, the Nasdaq lower by 8. Mixed data out today didn't help traders very much. Pending home sales rose 3.5% higher in April and reached their highest level in 9 years. But first-time jobless claims last week spiked higher by 7,000. Avago Technologies made it official, offering $37 billion for rival computer chip maker Broadcom. But since news of the deal leaked yesterday, the markets didn't see any boost on the deal today, and Broadcom shares actually ended a little lower. And J.P. Morgan Chase says it has already begun laying off 5,000 staffers over the next 2 years, 2% of its workforce. All Chase bank branches will see more ATM